Why did peoples of the past have such iconic heroic figures? The Hercules, Marduks, and Davids of the world. The Achilles and Hector locked in mortal combat before the tall walls of Troy. What happened to our mythical heroes? Do we even have any? I would argue that we in fact do. It isn't the concept of heroism which has changed, just its form and medium. In this case, our most prominent medium, at least for storytelling, is film, and it's also the most visceral. Not only do films have heroes, but there have been many film representations of the exact heroes of old I've mentioned. But heroes are often a reflection of their medium, and even more so, a reflection of the culture which has spawned them. Heroes created for film are more interesting in regards to film analysis than heroes made for other mediums which are then later adapted for film, because the intention with these characters, in terms of plot, themes, and visuals, is purely cinematic. Movies are a universal medium, and have been for a while, but Hollywood, the most influential source for film and film culture in the world, is distinctly American. And because of this, heroes made for Hollywood are not only unique to film as a medium, but also unique to America as a nation. So then the question becomes, what differentiates America from other nations? Well, you can come up with hundreds of answers to that question, but one that comes to my mind is that it's one of the small handful of nations to be founded around a political ideology. Based on its Lockean principles, which would include a natural distrust for authority and a romanticizing of rugged individualism, America is a nation built on the idea that troublemakers and rebels are the ones to push the world forward. So American heroes could be predicted as being those more likely to be troublemakers. Obviously, this isn't the only form of hero to be popular in Hollywood, but in my mind, it's the most stereotypically American. So then the next question is, which hero is the best representation of this principle? Well, can I pick two? If so, there's no doubt in my mind that the most American of American heroes in film are Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Yes, it's true that these characters are based on real historical figures, and maybe, more pressingly, these characters are outlaws, scoundrels, thieves. I don't disagree with that characterization, nor do I have any interest in glorifying the real figures they're based on. The behaviors seen on screen here can only be considered heroic, in quotes, within the controlled environment of film, a place where bullets never ricochet and hit women and children, and dynamite is always strong enough to blow up solid obstacles, but never strong enough to kill those standing behind said obstacles. Within the heavily curated and mannered context of a screenplay, heroes are dredged up from nothing. It's the actions and dialogue themselves which create heroes, not some designation on paper. We don't know Atticus Finch is a hero because the movie tells it to us. We know it because we can see it with our 2 eyes and hear it with our 2 ears. Butch Cassidy and Sundance, despite their legal status as outlaws, have been interpreted by viewers as heroes for 50+ years now. The fact that they rob banks doesn't detract from this gut instinct, at least not enough to nullify it. So what do we see as heroic in them? Number 1, good looks. That's obvious. It isn't necessarily the case that good-looking people are always deemed to be good, obviously. Hans Gruber, Norman Bates, and Catwoman are all good-looking and are all unequivocally villains. Even the living personification of lust itself, as portrayed in Full Metal Alchemist, is good-looking. If anything, her good looks are tied to her villainy. I think what makes Butch and Sundance different in this regard is the specific kind of good looks. They're good looks that we associate with friendliness and comfort, rather than good looks we associate with sin, debauchery, and mercenary advantage. The next obvious contributor to their heroic status is their personality. These are 2 extremely likable characters. Their dialogue between them has sort of been a standard bearer for buddy films ever since. They playfully joust with each other, but behind every demeaning statement is the implication of friendship and trust. The chemistry between Paul Newman and Robert Redford is legendary, so much so that it's been carried into other films with equal success. But good looks and charisma can only get you so far. Beyond that, what other traits do these characters possess which elevate them not only to the status of heroes, but to the status of something nearly mythological, the 20th century American equivalent to Hercules, King David, or Beowulf? There are 2 factors that I think are relevant. The first is rebellion. Again, America is a nation built on an initial act of rebellion. Not only was it a rebellion against the largest empire in world history, it was a rebellion against the concept of unmeritocratic hierarchy. King George, while more than competent enough, should have no say in what happens in the landmass of America, as he had never been elected to make that decision. He was appointed his role by birth, and from the perspective of the American colonists, and from the perspective of the British philosophers who influenced them, this was morally unacceptable. Butch and Sundance, while generally self-interested, at the very least feel principled to us because we can feel the weight of the system they're rebelling against. The very nature of lawman Joe LaForce and his crack team of headhunters, the competency of whom seems almost to be supernatural, leaves us with a sense that Butch and Sundance are against impossible odds. They're against forces so steadfast, well-rooted, and systematic that to fight against such a titan of an enemy is to thrash against the icon of injustice itself. Sure, our heroes thrust guns in people's faces, or leave them black with soot and blue with bruises due to their careless use of explosives, but their enemy, who has the power to do this to anyone times 100, make their actions seem noble in comparison. They are Robin Hood figures, sans the selflessness, with the anti-authoritarian streak of Snake Plissken, only without his characteristic nihilism. They do what they do for their community of each other and for the few friends and loved ones they have, and we as those who watch them relate to this. The other aspect though, and I think this is the one which elevates them to something more than just protagonists, but to something actually mythological. Mythological in an especially American way. These two characters are immortal. Now hear me out, yes it's true. Spoilers if you don't already know by the way, they die at the end. But unlike Bonnie and Clyde, who die in front of our eyes very vividly and with uncompromising violence, we are spared the horror of having to see these two wonderful men die in front of us. The movie captures them in their final glory, solidifies them there, keeping their last stand there for us with a photograph the same way that other famous moments were once captured in paintings or sculptures. Film, like photography, can capture things with increased accuracy and fidelity, but without any sacrifice in terms of nobility or beauty. Like Greek gods in stone, they're immortalized there in the moment of their heroism. Saving us from the sight of their death, from the nature of their mortality, puts us in the place of Etta, who left because, just like us, she couldn't stand to watch them die. The film looks away for us, but rather than an act of cowardice, it's just an act of myth-making not unlike that done in the past, where real historical figures, despite their blemishes, are polished by the vagaries of history until they fit our preconceived mold of who they likely were. Not only was this what happened with historical turned mythological figures like Gilgamesh, but there are even famous American examples, stories told about George Washington and cherry trees. I won't get into the specifics, but the symbolism of stories like that, which seem too good to be true most times because they are, is very profound. The lesson we take away from that story was that Washington was a noble man, and while he did indeed tell lies, his great qualities, no matter how exaggerated, still exist beyond question. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, men who waved guns in the faces of the innocent and who robbed the American people of their stored capital, are easy to mythologize as long as we focus solely on their most noble qualities, their bravery, charisma, skill, and their will to buck a system, a new world of laws, surveillance, and centralization, which cannot be overcome, only momentarily be irritated. A last act of congestion from us morsels of food trapped within the belly of this beast. The immortality of our two heroes seems to be well understood by even them. The final conversation they have before their last moments on Earth hit hard for us, and there's a reason for that. If we thought they were just delusional in their belief that they'd escape this situation, this conversation about a future restart in Australia would just be sad. The reason why it's so triumphant is because it symbolizes them not accepting death. They live on in the Australia of our hearts and minds, and no state, no matter how large, how deadly, or how competent, can ever kill them there.